Step away from the register now. We need to speak with you about your employment authorization.
I work here. I've worked here for 6 years. What is this about?
Are you a United States citizen?
Yes, I was born in Minnesota. Why are you asking me this here in front of
I
customers?
need to see documentation proving your citizenship and legal right to work. You need to come with
This
us.
is harassment.
The Tuesday afternoon felt like any other. Calm, slow, nothing out of the ordinary. The department store's fluorescent lights hummed as customers wandered the aisles. And at the front counter, Aaliyah Johnson was ringing up a return for one of her favorite regulars. She'd been there for 3 years, building a reputation as the employee who could handle any challenge and always greeted you with a smile. It was the kind of consistency that made shoppers ask for her by name. But that day, everything changed the moment 2 men in navy blue vests with large, unmistakable ICE letters entered the store and marched straight for the register. In seconds, the mood shifted. Aaliyah's smile faded, replaced by a chill that gripped her whole body. She was 28, born and raised in Minneapolis, never had trouble with the law, never even a speeding ticket. But as the agents, faces hard, postures aggressive, stopped in front of her, fear settled in her gut. There was no "excuse me," no "can we talk?" Instead, what unfolded over the next 40 minutes would become national news, caught in high definition by the store's security cameras, footage that would later help fuel one of the country's most significant civil rights lawsuits against ICE. These 2 agents weren't there to ask questions or check credentials. They'd already decided what they believed about Aaliyah simply by looking at her. They accused her of working illegally and loudly demanded to see her immigration documents right in front of customers and coworkers. When Aaliyah tried to explain that she was a U.S. citizen born just a few miles away, the agents ignored her and put her in handcuffs, dragging her toward the exit as she begged them to stop, insisting they were making a mistake. The reason for her detention? Nothing but the color of her skin and the sound of her last name. It was a scene so blatant, so textbook, that even customers who might have normally given law enforcement the benefit of the doubt found themselves shocked and angry. Before we dive any deeper, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe, because stories like this about regular people standing up to federal agents who thought they could treat anyone as a suspect deserve to be heard. This wasn't just a case of 2 agents gone rogue. It shined a light on a whole system of immigration enforcement that time and time again targets American citizens based solely on appearance. The 2 ICE agents, Robert Chen and Michael Torres, weren't new to this work. Chen had 15 years with the agency, Torres 8. Both had handled enforcement operations for years. They'd been patrolling the shopping district for weeks under the pretense of a targeted operation, supposedly searching for undocumented workers. But when lawyers later got access to internal ICE documents, it was clear their operation was little more than organized racial profiling, granting themselves permission to stop and question any person of color behind a cash register. Aaliyah, in the middle of processing a return for an elderly customer she knew well, immediately felt the tension rise. She noticed the ICE vests, and anxiety washed over her, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because she'd heard the stories, knew the risks. And she'd read about Black and brown citizens harassed, detained, sometimes even deported, just for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. She tried to stay calm, hoping maybe the agents were there about something else. But Chen stepped right up and announced, loud enough for half the store to hear, that they needed to talk to her about her employment. The words were carefully chosen, meant to put her on the spot, make her feel small, turn a normal afternoon into a public spectacle. Heads turned. Her manager, David, who'd hired her 3 years before, stepped out of his office. Aaliyah felt her cheeks burn, her throat tighten, even though she'd done nothing wrong. She asked politely if she could finish helping her customer. Chen dismissed her. "This isn't a request. Come with us now to answer questions about your immigration status." The elderly woman at the counter, who'd shopped there for years and always asked about Aaliyah's family, looked from Aaliyah to the agents, confused and alarmed. She insisted there must be some mistake, that Aaliyah was local and had always been a wonderful employee. Chen shut her down, telling her to step aside or risk interfering. Unfazed, the woman pulled out her phone and started recording. She knew something was very wrong. Aaliyah tried to clarify. "There's a misunderstanding. I was born in Minnesota. My birth certificate and passport are at home if you need proof." Chen didn't care. He claimed they had information saying she was a foreign national working without authorization, though as later documents revealed, there was no tip, no investigation, nothing but the agent's own bias. David, her manager, tried to de-escalate. "Aaliyah's documentation is all on file. I-9, Social Security, everything. I'll go get her file right now." But Chen cut him off, insisting that as a federal matter, he needed to back off or face charges for obstruction. David hesitated, unsure of his rights or how far he could push back without putting his own job on the line. So he stood there, helpless, as Torres stepped behind the counter, no warrant, no permission, blocking Aaliyah's escape, demanding she come with them. Aaliyah asked if she could call her family or a lawyer, anything to clear up the confusion. "No calls until you're processed," Chen snapped, making it clear they intended to detain her, regardless of the facts. Torres reached for his cuffs. Customers gasped. The cameras caught everything. Fear on Aaliyah's face, the agent's body language, phones coming out, David frozen in place. As Torres grabbed her arm, Aaliyah instinctively pulled back, not violently, just the natural reaction anyone would have. That was the excuse they needed. Chen shouted, "She's resisting, she's obstructing," even though the footage would show she'd done nothing but react out of fear. Torres pinned her against the counter while Chen slapped on the cuffs, so tight they'd leave marks photographed as evidence hours later. Aaliyah started to cry, not from pain, but from the utter humiliation of being cuffed like a criminal in front of everyone. The elderly customer recording the incident now raised her voice, demanding to know what crime justified this. Others chimed in, some filming, and others questioning the agent's authority to arrest someone with no warrant, no probable cause. The scene spiraled into chaos, but instead of stepping back, the agents doubled down. Chen turned to the crowd and barked, "Back away or you'll be detained too." It was an empty threat, but it worked. Some people stopped filming, scared into silence. David finally spoke up, saying he was calling corporate legal, that he didn't believe they had a right to arrest an employee without a warrant or evidence. Chen insisted immigration operations didn't need warrants the same way criminal investigations did, a half-truth at best, and designed to sound more convincing than it was. As they escorted Aaliyah, handcuffed and sobbing, toward the exit, her co-worker, Maria Rodriguez, rushed over, pleading for them to stop. She'd known Aaliyah for years and met her family, and through tears told the agents they were making a terrible mistake. Chen threatened Maria with investigation if she didn't return to work. All of it was caught on camera. Each step toward the door felt endless. Shoppers stared, some with sympathy, others with suspicion, assuming she must have done something wrong. The cuffs dug into her wrists, but that pain was nothing compared to the humiliation. Aaliyah kept repeating she was an American citizen, begging them to check her documents, but the agents ignored her completely. As they reached the parking lot, everything changed. A local police cruiser pulled in, called by a customer who dialed 911 after witnessing the chaos. The officer, Sergeant Kenya Williams, a black woman, 15 years on the force, stepped out, taking in the scene. A crying black woman in cuffs, yet 2 ICE agents, witnesses, shouting and recording. Williams calmly asked what was happening, addressing Aaliyah first, a clear sign she wasn't taking the agent's word as gospel. Aaliyah managed, through tears, to say she was a U.S. citizen and had done nothing wrong. Williams then asked the agents for their documentation, a warrant, a deportation order, something that justified this. Chen insisted none was needed for an administrative immigration investigation. Williams, familiar with the law, countered, "You still need reasonable suspicion. What evidence do you have that she's not a citizen?" The agent stumbled. Torres mumbled something about an anonymous tip, but couldn't say why it pointed to Aaliyah and not any of the store's other employees. Chen tried to pull rank, saying this was a federal matter. Williams stood her ground. So she wasn't interfering, she said, but had an obligation to protect the rights of Minneapolis residents. Detaining someone with no articulable suspicion wasn't allowed, no matter the agency. She suggested, at minimum, that Aaliyah be allowed to provide her identification before being taken away. Suddenly, witnesses regained their courage. David brought out Aaliyah's employment file, including a copy of her Minnesota birth certificate and driver's license. Maria brought her personal bag from the break room with her wallet and current ID. Williams checked the documents, then turned to the agents. "This is an official Minnesota birth certificate. What evidence do you have that contradicts this?" Chen claimed birth certificates could be forged, but Williams pointed out they'd made zero effort to verify anything before handcuffing Aaliyah. Yet Williams told the agents she was documenting everything and would recommend a full investigation unless they had clear cause to continue. The message landed. After a whispered discussion, Chen reluctantly agreed to verify documents on site rather than at their facility. Torres removed the cuffs. Williams photographed Aaliyah's wrists, making an official record of excessive force. The agent spent 20 minutes making calls, verifying Aaliyah's documents. During this time, more police officers arrived. Witnesses offered statements and footage, all agreeing Aaliyah had done nothing wrong. When the agents returned, they admitted Aaliyah was indeed a U.S. citizen. No apology, just, "You're free to go," and an attempt to leave as if nothing unusual had happened. Williams stopped them, took their badge numbers, and promised a full report. Aaliyah, trembling, was hugged by Maria. David told her to take the day off with pay, that the store would cover counseling if needed, and that corporate stood behind her if she wanted to take legal action. Williams gave Aaliyah her card and recommended she document her injuries, see a doctor, and talk to a civil rights attorney. Within days, video of the incident went viral. Aaliyah in tears, repeating, "I'm an American citizen," as agents cuffed her. Outrage followed, and the ACLU, NA, ACP, and other groups offered support. Journalists discovered Chen and Torres had histories of similar complaints, with previous cases where citizens had been wrongly detained. Aaliyah struggled after the incident, panic attacks, nightmares, fear of law enforcement. Her mother was heartbroken and angry, unable to understand how her daughter could be treated as a criminal in her own country. 3 weeks later, top-tier civil rights attorneys filed a federal lawsuit on her behalf, suing the agents for false arrest, excessive force, emotional distress, and civil rights violations, and suing ICE for policies that enabled systemic racial profiling. Legal discovery revealed even more disturbing facts. The anonymous tip the agents claimed had never existed. GPS data showed weeks of patrolling and profiling. Internal ICE emails described targeting high-probability industries as code for service jobs held by people of color. Both agents had multiple complaints for racially motivated stops, but none had resulted in real discipline. Deposition after deposition, the agents' stories fell apart. They contradicted each other, made up facts, failed to explain how they'd followed policy. When asked what procedure allowed cuffing an American citizen without even checking her, ID, they had no answers. The case became a national flashpoint. 15 months later, the settlement broke records. $5.2 million to Aaliyah, one of the largest for misconduct in U.S. history. But the money was only part of it. For the first time, the federal government publicly admitted wrongdoing, acknowledging the violation of her rights and that the detention was racially motivated. Chen and Torres were both fired, their law enforcement certifications permanently revoked. Chen served 18 months in federal prison, Torres 6 months in probation. The settlement forced ICE to change its policies. Agents now must verify citizenship before detention, can't use race as a factor, and anonymous tips must be fully documented. All agents went through thus new training on racial profiling, citizens' rights, and de-escalation. An independent civilian review panel was created to handle complaints and recommend discipline. Aaliyah used her settlement to start the Johnson Foundation, providing legal and emotional support to others targeted by immigration enforcement. In 4 years, the foundation helped over 200 people win justice, resulting in millions in settlements and changes to field office practices nationwide. Her case became required training for federal agents. Her story shared in classrooms, law enforcement seminars, and legislative hearings. Sergeant Williams was promoted and asked to develop new protocols for police departments on how to intervene when federal agents might be violating rights. Her approach, respectful but firm, documenting everything, became a model nationwide. David, the manager, worked to strengthen company policies and spoke out about the responsibility of witnesses to speak up even when it means facing authority. Aaliyah never returned to that store. The trauma was too deep. She struggled with PTSD, but found purpose in activism, speaking at universities, in front of Congress, and at civil rights events, making it clear that racial profiling isn't about citizenship, but appearance. Her foundation changed hundreds of lives. The store's security footage became a training tool, a reminder of what unchecked bias and power can look like in real life. 10 years later, Aaliyah reflected on what she'd lost and what she'd gained. She still crossed the street to avoid law enforcement. The scars, physical and emotional, remained, but she'd built something lasting out of her pain, changing policy, helping others, forcing federal agencies to answer for their actions. Her case proved that even ordinary people, when they refuse to stay silent, can change the system. And it sent a message that racial profiling by federal enforcement would now come with real and expensive consequences.